Well, coming out of that transition phase, 2008, when we recognized we had a wonderful company that was in a model that was quickly shifting beneath our feet, we needed to speed up our innovation process. And so we took a look back at the last 10 years of new product development, and we had launched 54 products. 4 of them had achieved at least $50 million in revenue. The others, quite frankly, had not been very successful at all. So we dug into the ashes, and we said, what are the learnings in here? What are the things that we can get underneath? And one of the things we realized is we've been optimizing for features, and we've been optimizing for ease. And one of the great quotes that I love is, you can make a sewing machine easier to use, but it doesn't mean I'm going to sew. You have to really step back and look at what the customer is trying to do, and you have to solve that customer problem. As Clay Christensen says, what is the job the customer is hiring your product to do? So when we decided we needed to become more design-driven, we realized that ease and features are not the game plan. It is impact and emotion, much like the iPhone did for the mobile phone industry. Completely reimagined what a phone was capable of doing and made it so important that in the Great Recession, when people were asked, what are the 5 things you can't do without, the iPhone was actually at the top of the list next to microwave ovens and other things they needed to live. And that's what design-driven thinking does.
So keep going. So how would you, so you define design-driven then as?
Design-driven for us,
Yeah.
2 components. First of all, it is not the realm of designers and engineers and product managers only.
Yeah.
Everyone in the company has a role to play in design-driven thinking. Finance, HR, legal, every single corner of the company needs to be thinking design-driven thinking, and I can talk about how you do that later.
Sure.
The second is, we actually went through a pretty rigorous process to test what are the components of design-driven thinking. How do you create awesome design? It's got 3 core pieces. We call it the delight pyramid. At the base is nailing the customer benefit. Why did I hire this product? What is the job I want it to do? The second is, it has to have a breakthrough in ease, something that you could have never imagined was possible. I had no idea this thing was a computer and not a phone. I didn't realize I could have my family's pictures right here. I mean, all the things that the iPhone did. And then the last is, you have to design emotion into your product. Now imagine in our company, when I first started to talk about that, I had people say, look, we do accounting and taxes. People don't have emotions about accounting and taxes. They just want to get them done. So I took them out to Amazon and read the reviews of our products. And you read a lot of emotion in those products. And then my question was, is that the emotion we want to create? And if it's not, then we need to be thinking about what is the outcome we're solving for. Those 3 components, and you work with the teams to make sure they have a product vision that's very clear about the customer benefit, very clear how they're going to do this in a way that's transformational, 10x better than anybody else, and what is the specific emotion. And the emotion changes the tone, it changes the colors, it changes where you place the buttons. All that stuff leads to an emotional outcome.
Yeah.
So years ago, we began to wrestle with this unstructured time where we're going to create a bunch of startups that eventually would want to go out and take the idea and say, look, I'm going to go do this on my own. I could become a gazillionaire. So we began to interview our best innovators inside the company, and we said, what is it that you wished you would get if you came up with an idea that changed the company's trajectory and changed a customer's life? And they said, time to work on it. We said, really? What about financials? And they said, well, it's interesting, but we actually want to see this come to fruition. We build stuff because we want it to change a customer's life. So we introduced something called the Scott Cook Innovation Awards. And what happens is, every year, out of all these unstructured time experiments, we'll put many into market, and there's about a half a dozen that get nominated and selected, and then Scott and I will sit down and we'll make the final decision on who wins. The winners of those awards get their choice. They get 3 months off 100% of the time, 100% off for 3 months, to work on that project or any other project in the company they're interested in, or 6 months at 50% off. And then what we have done, without ever announcing it, we did a look back at some of the best ideas that came out, and there was a gentleman who actually launched a payments business that's now it's a multi-$100-million business for us. He just wanted the time, and we gave that to him, but we awarded him $1 million, a Founders Award. And so now that's in the system as, wow, if I come up with the next thing, that could be mine too. And so it really is, though, about when you sit and talk to the teams, they say, I actually want to have the ability to work on something that matters. I want to see it make it to market, and the management team give it the resources it needs, and that's all I'm looking for. And so that's the way we've been able to manage it so far, and it's worked. The how we use is Jeffrey Moore wrote a book called Horizon Planning, Horizon Management. And what we do here is Google's often referred to it as 60-30-10. We have a 70-20-10. But what we basically say is, what are the products today that have made us the mainstay in a customer's life, TurboTax, Quick, and QuickBooks? And what are you going to do to measure the success of those products? It's like market share, revenue, and profitability, but what are you going to do to continue to make them better tomorrow? And you put resources in there, in our case 70%. The next 20% are the adolescent products. Their products have already been proven. They're growing really, really quickly, and you want to fund them for growth. You don't expect them to be profitable, but you do expect them to get more profitable with every unit they sell. You got to prove scale. And we put 20% of our resources there. The last 10% is unstructured time. These are the experiments. What are the ideas that could produce tomorrow's big oak trees? The one rule of thumb is general managers and business leaders have to have the resources allocated, and you're never allowed to borrow from one bucket for the other. So if you run into trouble in the short, you've got to reallocate your 70%. You cannot go borrow from Horizon 2 or Horizon 3, because otherwise you're stealing from tomorrow to take care of today. That discipline sounds easy. It is incredibly hard, but if you do it, it produces a steady pipeline of new ideas. And so we got on that journey quickly, and it galvanized the team. The second thing we did is immediately, in that first 100 days, we adopted unstructured time. That is 10% time where our employees can work on any project they want that they think will solve a customer problem. We borrowed it from Google, and it's really based on the premise of we don't believe in the genius in 1,000 helpers. We actually believe that the best ideas should emerge, and the way to do that is through experimentation. And so we unleashed unstructured time, and immediately we moved into lots of experiments, and that fueled growth. We got $100 million in revenue from products that I didn't actually prioritize in the first 2 years.
I'm interested in that. So I've been out to Google, and I guess they give
Yes.
people 20% sort of unstructured time.
Yeah.
And they come up with ideas, and they, stand in line and sort of present, here's what I'm thinking for 10 minutes to whoever's in charge. How do you do it? So people come up with ideas, and then what's the process for filtering out good workable ones from the rest?
Well, that's something that we ended up editing as a result of meeting with Google, and they shared with us that if you looked at their track record of success, it wasn't always the ones that were selected by the management team, it was the ones that were posted up on Google Labs. And then you saw who was getting the most downloads and where the customer feedback was the most positive, and you let the market choose. So we avoided the whole thumbs up and thumbs down because I knew I wasn't going to be the one who could pick the next great thing, but the market could. And so what we started to do is we taught the lean startup experimentation process, where every team has a hypothesis. It's a team no bigger than 2 pizzas can feed. They run a rapid experiment with the roughest prototype possible, and then if they actually validate that it exceeds their hypothesis, they come in and we fund it. I have a fund called the CEO Fund. It's like venture capital money, and I will give them money for 90 days, and they run the next experiment. And so we ultimately fund successful experiments, and the team shut down the ones that aren't successful because they're intellectually honest. If it didn't achieve their hypothesis, they don't want to go show their boss, look, I did something and it didn't work. And so they literally self-assess.
Yeah. Are there any examples of something that came from the bottom up that you've adopted?
We have quite a few. A great example is the ability to do your taxes on your mobile phone. So when we first went out with Social, Mobile, and Global, I talked to our team in TurboTax, and I'd been the general manager there, so there was a whole lot of familiarity with me. And I said, look, we've got to figure out how we're going to deal with this computer in the palm of our hand. And one of the engineers used a very familiar, what the hell does a mobile phone have to do with taxes? Excuse my French. And I said, I don't know that, but you're smarter than me and you'll figure it out. Well, sure enough, what they figured out how to do was to take a picture of all your tax documents using the phone's camera, having optical character recognition actually read the data and pre-fill your entire tax return, and your taxes can be done in less than 10 minutes. And that is now one of the most significant catalysts of driving our growth in TurboTax. And that came from an unstructured time experiment.